I'm Rachel Nichols,
here.
joined here by just a couple of NBA champions, Kendrick Perkins, Richard Jefferson.
It sure is quiet in here today.
Why are you quiet?
I'm just saying, it is. It's quiet.
I can't even tell if that's a dig at Suns fans or a dig at Richard.
It's probably both, but mainly Suns fans because...
mainly you, probably.
Yeah, probably me, but it's cool. It's cool.
So Richard came out on yesterday's show and made a big deal that with the Suns up 3-1, he was getting out on a limb and he's going to pick them to win the series.
No. Win the whole thing. Not just the series. Don't limit it. The whole thing.
He's brave. He's very brave.
Yes.
We will discuss Paul George's performance shortly, but first, so in movies, we are used to characters that just won't die. Michael Myers from Halloween, Arnold Schwarzenegger from Terminator, Han from Fast and the Furious, which I'm actually pretty happy about. But anyway, you can now add the Clippers to that list. In series after series, round after round, LA just keeps coming like a pack of zombies. We saw it last night once again here in Phoenix, interrupting what could have been a storybook moment for the Suns. Certainly the same stage seemed pretty set for Phoenix to roll. The Clippers are not only still missing their best player in Kawhi Leonard, they suffered yet another big injury blow prior to the game, losing their starting center. The Clips were also playing their 18th game in 38 nights. But meanwhile, the Suns still chipper after having a week-long rest before this series, and frankly, it all seemed to be coming together for a Phoenix team looking to advance to its first NBA Finals in nearly 30 years. And for Chris Paul, the most accomplished player of his generation, to have not yet reached that promised land. Except none of that happened as the Clippers once again rose from the dead. Marcus Morris was just sensational at the start, pacing the Clippers out to a 20-5 lead. From there on, we saw contributions from DeMarcus Cousins, from Reggie Jackson, from Patrick Beverley. Pat Bev, by the way, was in full-on Pat Bev mode last night, most notably after this collision with Chris Paul in the third quarter. CP hits the deck, and I suppose Pat thought Chris was milking the moment because he started imitating and making fun of the fall. That got a lot of attention from the arena crowd, but frankly, it was really a sideshow to the real main event that was developing in the second half, which was Paul George absolutely, positively going off in a way that, frankly, should not have been really possible. PG leads the NBA in minutes this postseason, and not by a little bit. He has played 735 minutes, 130 more than any other player. That's insane. And keep in mind how hard-earned every one of those minutes has had to be, given the defensive attention Paul has attracted since Kawhi went out. And yet, there was PG, cashing in shot after shot, answering every time Phoenix tried to make a run. By the time he was done, he had 41 points total, 30 in the second half alone, a half in which he shot 83% from the field. The performance was more than enough to help the Clippers stave off elimination. But don't just take my word for it. Look at the company that PG joined last night. That is just flat out star stuff, and it reinforced just how long past time it is to let go of the PG slander that's been circulating around the league for longer than anyone should want to admit. No, Paul George is not perfect. No, he is not the greatest or most clutch player of his generation. But people, that's not the bar. The choice is not, are you the best or do you suck? There needs to be room to appreciate someone who can clearly flat out hoop, who, yes, sometimes falls, but then always gets up and emerges tougher. After the game, ESPN's Om Youngmisuk asked PG if he feels he gets picked on more than other players.
I do, and it's the honest truth. It's a fact, but I can't worry about that. I'm beyond that. You know what I mean? I'm beyond that. I am who I am. I wish I could shoot 80%, 75% on a nightly basis, but it's not realistic. But what I can do is do everything else. And so it is what it is. They can judge me on what they want to. That part don't matter to me. I'm gonna go out there and hoop and give everything I got.
I don't know where this trolling bull has come from, where the internet controls the narrative about these players. It's becoming foolish, man. Like I said earlier in the year, that's one of the most special players to ever lace his shoes up. Get this dude his flowers, man. I don't understand the slander. It's becoming quite silly now. Like, respect these players, man. Respect these greats.
Paul George should get his respect for all he has done this postseason. And look, I don't know how much longer he can keep doing it, frankly, or how long the whole team can keep doing it. At some point, the injuries and the minutes and the travels, the laws of physics say it should eventually be too much. Then again, the laws of physics don't explain how a guy can survive a fireball consuming his car on the streets of Tokyo. Hey, worked for Han, and maybe, just maybe, it can work for PG and the Clippers too. Guys, a little F9 there.
I'm okay with Han.
Had to go there. The Clippers find themselves just 2 wins away from their first finals appearance in franchise history after PG's huge game last night. Richard, do you feel he has silenced the doubters with his performance in these playoffs?
Yes, and the thing that I find most impressive is the fun part for me is looking at the totality of his whole career. This is the Indiana Paul George. This is who he believes he was. And when you saw some of the struggles, it was because he was paired next to another superstar, whether it was Russell Westbrook or Kawhi Leonard. And I think at times he would defer, then he would lose some of his rhythm. He wouldn't be that same aggressive player that we saw so much earlier in his career. But now, when you just put it on him and you say, hey, go lead us, he does an absolute phenomenal job. And this is the Paul George. And I think some of the criticism is because when you saw it in Indiana, this is what you expected for the rest of his career because he did it so early and battled against Titans like, the Miami Heat and all that. So I think that he is silencing his doubters, but ultimately I think he's in a different situation than he's been in prior times.
Well, I think that, look, Paul George is playing phenomenal right now. And I just want to address the part where he was talking about he gets unfair criticism or more criticism than any other player. But he put himself under this microscope. He the one that gave himself a nickname called Playoff P. So you got to perform like it because now we're watching you. It's the same thing with Damian Lillard when he says Dame time. We know he's going to give us a historical performance. Kevin Durant, back when he was with Golden State, and he said, you know who I am. I'm KD.
Right.
And he came out and he murdered the Clippers, right? So at the end of the day, he put himself in this position. But I will say this, right? Since Kawhi Leonard went out, Ty Lue told me he had a meeting with Paul George, and he said, hey, man, when I go to the steakhouse, I don't just want appetizers. I want the filet, I want the sides, I want everything, meaning I want you to be aggressive. I want you to give it everything you got. I don't care if you go 0 for 20. I want you to go down swinging. And what I'm seeing out of Paul George is he's entering his name right back into the word superstar because he's averaging 30 points, 11 rebounds, 6 assists since Kawhi's been out, and he's been playing phenomenal. But most importantly, he's been coming up when it matters the most.
Look, I just wonder, is there room for a middle ground? Like, can we just have not the talk radio take of either he's terrible or he's the best ever? When talking about Paul George, I feel like people start like, well, so-and-so did this. I'm like, right, but so-and-so is a top 5 all-time NBA player.
Great. I'm with him. I do think Paul George gets some unnecessary, especially in the regular season. Like you have an off night. It's like the same people that are running to criticize him aren't the people that are running to congratulate him. That being said, some of the losses that they had last year in the bubble, the way that they played against Oklahoma City, the way they played against Utah, those were 3 consecutive year bad losses. So that's accumulation of something. So I'm with you.
There's got to be room for.
There is.
He's not the greatest of all time. No, he's not the greatest of all time.
No, he's very, very, very.
That's okay. That doesn't have to be the standard. I did want to ask, because we were talking about this in Perk. I want to get your thoughts. Richard and I were talking post game about a stretch in the fourth quarter where Paul George, I thought, okay, this is it. He's running out of gas, and it was pretty brilliant how the rest of the team kind of picked him back up.
Yeah, no, what I saw here is look, he had a couple of kind of loose turnovers, and look, you could just see him not getting back on defense. And this is not like you saw with Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant was exhausted.
Yep.
And then you see Paul George. This man is doing every single thing he could do. But what I noticed with T. Lue and what a lot of people don't see, right after this 3 consecutive plays, crowd's going crazy. T. Lue calls a post up for Morris. Morris goes and posts up, takes his time. But a lot of people were like, oh, why are they posting up Morris right now? And it's like, because Paul George needs a break. And sometimes he got a 24-second break where he just got to stay in the corner, let Morris go to work. And when players like that deliver, when you have Morris or Pat Beverly or Reggie Jackson deliver in those moments, it gives superstars a break, and then Paul George closed that game.
To be honest, this is the way I feel about Paul George, right? Whether the Clippers win this series, whether he plays well throughout the rest of the postseason, I don't even care. He's earned my respect because he's laying it out on the line. When you see a guy that's exhausted like that, it reminds me of Delly. You remember Dellavedova?
Yeah.
When he had to get carried off the court, I think it was like Game 3 of the NBA Finals, and they had to take him to the emergency room and put an IV in him.
Yeah.
This is what PG is doing, and I love to see it, but this is the Paul George that we've been waiting on, we've been wanting to see, and he's getting his moment, and I love it. Ty Lue has put that key into his back. And what you said, RJ, about him getting those 24 seconds of rest, for the first time, I saw Ty Lue animated on the sideline, and he got mad at his team down the stretch. He said, run the play again, meaning go back to Paul George. He was milking Paul George to death towards the end of the game, and I love every minute of it.
Yeah.
Again, Paul George has played 735 minutes
games
in this playoffs.
God bless him,
130 minutes more than any other player. That's not an excuse. It is just a fact. And the fact that he has not run out of gas yet is something that, again, got to salute him for. I do want to get to what happened back to what happened in the third quarter, right, with Pat Bev and the flagrant foul on Chris Paul. It went to a video review. The ref took a close look at this one. Here's what Monty Williams had to say on the play after the game.
Some of the stuff that's happening is just, it is what it is. But when a guy does that kind of stuff consistently, you know, what do you say as a coach? I can call the league. I can talk to, you know, the officials in the NBA. It doesn't do anything until something's done about it. You know, those kinds of plays are dangerous. You know what I mean?
All right, so Perk, what did you think of the flagrant call on that play? I thought it was interesting that the guys in the booth, the guys broadcasting the game, didn't seem to think it was a flagrant, and Steve Javie came on the broadcast and said he didn't think it was a flagrant, but clearly Monty Williams did, and I can tell you the Suns fan in the arena certainly did.
Well, I did too, and I'm a little younger than those guys that are way in the booth and Steve Javie, so maybe, you know, their eyesight is starting to go away because of their age, but that was a clear flagrant. Look, this is not football. This is a chop block, and even in the NFL, look, this is illegal.
No, I'm not even going to let you finish this nonsense. I'm not even there's not a flagrant foul. You know why Chris Paul wasn't upset? Because Chris Paul jumped to the right. Chris Paul jumped to the right.
He jumped.
Look, he did jump. What I'm saying, though, is that's how guys are getting fouls, Perk. That's why they're talking about changing the rule. You have Trae Young when he gets no, listen, Perk, let me finish there.
First of all, I was the one that was
It's okay, let me finish. I was
really
interrupted. You weren't saying anything.
I was.
When Trae Young gets a guy behind him, he will jump backwards and then throw a shot. That's what they're trying to eliminate. Chris Paul, right there in that moment, as Patrick Beverley's trying to come, Chris Paul jumps to the right. You can literally see it in slow motion. He jumps to the right to draw the cut. Look, that's not a natural shot motion.
RJ.
Up and down and forward is a natural shot motion. That's not a flagrant. I'm sorry,
RJ, whether he jumped to the right, whether he jumped to the left.
You got to give the defender space.
Whether he did the cha-cha slide, I really don't care. At the end of the day, that was not a basketball play.
It wasn't.
Why was he around his legs? Why was Patrick Beverley around the leg area?
Okay, you haven't ever gone around screens as a big man. That is no disrespect.
I know it not.
When you're trying to, you make yourself as small as possible. You turn and you're trying to navigate the screen. Now, when a player jumps backwards into you, he's elevated.
The camera is this way.
I'm just showing you.
I know how to get up over the screen.
No,
yeah,
you don't. Point being is this, Rach. There's a reason why they're going to change the rule. There's a reason why the rules committee are having these conversations, because that right there, like Chris Paul almost hurt himself trying to draw the foul. If you look at it in slow motion, Chris Paul doesn't jump up, doesn't jump, he jumps to the right as Patrick Beverley's coming. So that's what takes out his legs. That's why the people in the booth were upset, because they had the replay.
Rachel, you know how like sometimes you want to get away from your kids because they get on your nerves in the house? Well, it's the other way around with RJ.
You want to go back home?
No, his kids are happy when he leaves.
What are you laughing back there for?
We will survey.
Producers laughing?
We will survey RJ's two tiny children at some point later in the jump run. I do want to get to Trae Young. We're going to talk about
in 28 years.
We just have to have a great deal of balance. We know we're going to see a desperate team.
Jackson goes hard and throws it down. A near perfect start for the Clippers.
Poised right now. You just got to stay the course.
Three-pointer. Bang! George on the pull-up, nails a three.
Oh, George rolling.
Throws it down with authority.
That's just who we are. Fight, we scrappy. The most important thing, we do it together.
Nichols. I am still here with Kendrick Perkins, Richard Jefferson. They're both wearing jackets and pants. It's a red letter day. After Game 5, Suns coach Monty Williams said his team played with a, quote, show-up mentality in the first quarter, while the Clippers played with, quote, desperation. So, Perk, who needs to step up for the Suns in Game 6 tomorrow night?
Well, it's two people. One, I talked about this yesterday on the show with you guys about CP3 and his legacy. Well, his legacy is still on the line about blowing 3-1 leads. And here it is. He's the head of the snake, and he has the opportunity to capitalize on the moment, and he needs to. The second person, where's Jay Crowder at right now? Right? Jay Crowder has been phenomenal throughout the postseason. He was really good against the Denver Nuggets. He's not doing anything. I believe he's like averaging 4 points in this series. I believe he's shooting like 4 for 26 from the three or something to that nature. He's not defending because Paul George is having it his way. Reggie Jackson is having it his way. So I'm looking at these two veteran guys of this young team, and they have to elevate their game and set the tone.
I actually agree. Like, I think Jay Crowder's got to do more. Jay Crowder knows he has to do more. This is not something that isn't getting voiced to him. But the two people I think need to step up are Chris Paul and Devin Booker. You talked about when Devin Booker's in 11 elimination games, he's averaging a 40 piece. Like, that's ridiculous. And I'm not saying that that's what he gets, but everybody knows this in this league. First round, like, elimination games are easy. Second round games are a little bit harder. And then the finals, putting a team out the further you go.
But this isn't an elimination game for the Suns, and isn't that part of it? I mean, it sounds shocking to me that the Clippers came out with more desperation than the team that was up 3-1.
Yeah, well, I'm more talking about eliminating a team.
No,
like,
I know,
eliminate, but I just think that it gets harder, and I think, like, as much as Devin Booker and some of these young players have raised their level, guys, there's more levels to go. To win an NBA championship, you're going to go against the Bucks or you're going to go against the Atlanta Hawks. So it's like what you did last round, it's got to go harder. You got to go harder. You got to keep pushing yourself. So those are the two guys. If Chris Paul and Devin Booker show up, there hasn't been a time where those two showed up and played at a high level where everyone else didn't fall in line.
I would just say this. Look, we talk about the comebacks from 3-1. You obviously, Richard, were part of the team with the most famous one of all. We talked about, Perk, you mentioned that Chris Paul has been on the wrong end of 3-1 comebacks. We talk about them because they're notable. It's not what usually happens.
Yeah.
What often happens is either it becomes, quote, a gentleman's sweep, right, a 4-1 kind of thing, or it becomes where, hey, the team that's up 3-1 gets a little bit like either tight or just doesn't play as desperate as the team that shockingly is going to be eliminated and therefore is very desperate. And so the team that's down wins. And then more often than the other way, the team that's leading ends up winning the series. Those are just the numbers. So just because the Suns came out less desperate in this game last night, I don't feel like that's an indication of how the rest of the series is going to go. It's kind of how it usually goes. Not all the time, but more often than not, this is what we see. And now we'll see what the Clippers can do at home on their home court. I do want to just address the Kawhi Leonard sort of wrinkle of all this. He has, of course, missed the last 7 games due to what the Clippers say is a right knee sprain. This matters whether the Clippers win or lose, especially because Kawhi has the ability to opt out and become a free agent once again this summer. Now, I want to stress, this does not mean that, oh, wow, he's going to opt out and leave the Clippers. Nobody is saying that. But what is up for discussion is, could he sign a longer-term deal if he opts out? Side note, happy 30th birthday to Kawhi, so that's important to know, too. You've got a guy who is getting into that decade of his life. Of course, he could decide to go somewhere else, but there's just no indication of that publicly at all. So the question is, if he decides to stay with the Clippers, how should he do this? What should he do? And do you think, Richard, the knee issues he's having now, and this is why it's kind of coming up right now, will impact his decision?
I can't speak for Kawhi, but we can speak for players that we have seen over the course of our career. When you've seen, like, again, even in his championship run, and you look at how they have rested him over the course, the expectations of Kawhi are when he's on your roster, you have a chance to win a championship. So you're always going to be looking to be playing more games and more minutes than like a normal player. That being said, I look for security. But everybody looks for different things. So if he wants that security, it's like, dude, if you have a knee injury that's keeping you out from the postseason and you're a free agent and you can sign a 4-year deal and give yourself $176 million of security, that's where I'm going to lean. But everybody looks at it differently.
No, I'm right there with you. My grandfather always told me, never pass up something for show, trying to get some more. And here it is right in front of his face, right? The Clippers want to give him everything in the world. They has given him everything in the world, as far as private helicopters from his house to the arena to...
They got Paul George.
Yeah, letting him do whatever he want to do, right? Building an arena in Inglewood. So if I'm Kawhi,
I don't think that's because of Kawhi, but continue.
it's part of it has a little bit to do with Kawhi, right? If Kawhi don't go there, then Steve Ballmer probably is not enthusiastic about building the arena. But that's neither here or there. If I'm Kawhi, I sign that extension or deal, whatever it is, and I stay with the Clippers.
Well, because this is the thing about the one-year deal. If you were to sign a one-year deal to get that fifth-year bird rights,
Right.
you don't know what's going to happen in that 1 year. And if you're coming off something and there's a possibility of surgery and there's a possibility if they telling you here this and you're like, well, I want to wait 1 more year and see if my knee holds up. And this is after being rested for multiple seasons. This is after the issues in San Antonio. And really, we saw him labor. That was part of the impressive thing in the Toronto Raptors. We saw him laboring. I have no idea why he's clapping.
I
saw him, laboring in Toronto when he won the championship. Why are you clapping for?
No, because I'm so proud of you, man. You actually digging in your bag every single day. Now you talking about bird rights and
I know,
you
right?
sound
That's
like
a good point.
Look, that Schwartz gave me that at first. Schwartz gave me that information.
You sound like a front office.
Shout out to our researcher, Michael Schwartz.
Yeah. Schwartz gave me that
for
information.
making
I can't
RJ
even
look good. I was trying to
we
get
make each
props.
other look. Don't give me no cry. I don't want nothing from you.
I would also just say that Steve Ballmer has been talking about building a new arena kind of since he started owning the team. They don't get all the concession money and all the stuff, and I think the fans would like an arena of their own, but certainly the excitement of Kawhi and PG and this run will help sort of build toward when they do finally get to open that arena. So that's good for them too. We'll see what everybody does. There's time still to think about this because the Clippers are still alive in the NBA playoffs. Coming up, new Celtics could
I don't know what I'm doing. I don't talk like that. I use sarcasm.
Let's switch gears. I want to talk about tonight's game in Atlanta. Trae Young, guys, questionable with that bone bruise in his foot. Richard, how do you expect Trae's injury to impact the game?
You're going to see in the first few minutes, but this is the thing that you worry about with the Milwaukee Bucks. It's like, put your foot right there on their neck and that's it. Just give them nothing. Give them absolutely nothing because you know the longer that they get, the more he warms up the ankle, the more he starts to get into the rhythm, the more they'll start to believe. But this is an opportunity for the Bucks to just put them down. He's not 100%, but we'll see in the first 5 minutes. It's hard for us to speculate until you actually start to see him.
No, he's actually hurt. And my advice to Trae Young, just like I gave advice to Kevin Durant and Anthony Davis, you have nothing else to prove, in my opinion. And I think he shouldn't play tonight, to be honest with you, because he's hurt. You know, the Hawks have exceeded expectations, and Trae Young going out there at 50% is not going to help the situation against this Milwaukee Bucks team. So, Trae Young, if you're out there listening, Mr. Young, his dad, hey, sit out for the night. No one is going to look down
that would be the first time anyone listened to Perk. What I will say, though, is this.
It's feel sorry for their loss.
The point is, we don't know until we give it a try. We don't know if he's 50%, if he's 70%. We know. All of us can see that ankle and be like, that's going to be sore for a couple of days. I'm not going to sit up here as a Twitter doctor like Perk and say sit out, but you'll know in the first 5-10 minutes.
I don't, as I said, I have not seen the medical report on Trae Young's ankle, but I know Trae Young well enough to know he is going to at least try to give it a go tonight. I don't know if that will even extend to tip-off. He'll just try up in warm-ups, but I can't imagine him just turning around and saying, nah, never mind. So we'll find out if that happens. Welcome back to The Jump. The guy's still with me. Richard is having paper airplane issues, but we'll get to that later. It's time for our daily spin around the NBA coaching carousel. Let's start with new Celtics head coach Ime Udoka. Take a listen.
We've all talked already. They're excited. I thank them for the kind words they said about me, pushing me, and it was a natural bond with us. Coincidentally, I'm here now. Obviously, thought Brad would be here forever, so it was just a natural connection with those guys that I had, and they're going to allow me to coach them, push them. They know I'm going to be on their ass, and that's what they like about me. They've asked me about that, and so they want to be pushed. They want to be directed towards winning, and you expect that from your stars.
Let's see.
Perk, obviously your ties to the Celtics, not just in the past, but you are on local TV there for broadcasts. Yeah. What do you think of the way Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum can flourish under this new hire?
You know what? I love it because for the simple fact he called them out publicly, right? And not in a bad way, but he's saying, hey, look, I'm going to challenge you guys. We already know that these two young guys are two of the most talented young studs in the NBA, but he's going to challenge them to be leaders, especially Jason Tatum. He has to be more vocal. He has to be more about the team. And I'm not calling them selfish. I'm saying more about just uplifting guys, talking in huddles, just doing little things that leaders do. We already know what type of leader Jaylen Brown is because we saw what he done off the court with the George Floyd situation and how he was, how vocal he is. So I actually love what he did in the press conference. I think the sky's the limit for my Boston Celtics.
For your Boston Celtics. Okay. Look, I completely agree. What I really like about this is I had an opportunity to talk to Brad Stevens earlier in the year when we were doing one of the games, and he said like his goal for Tatum and Brown were to be two of the best leaders by the time they turn 27. So they have this game plan. You don't want to put too much on young players. You want to allow them to develop and grow into this. So when I hear Ime talk about this, what I hear is Brad Stevens, and that means that there is a connection from the front office to the coaching staff. And they're like, hey, this is what we've been working on with them, and this is what we're handing it to you. And he's like, yes, I like that plan. I want to echo that plan. I want to continue pushing them. So that just to me shows that the Boston Celtics have a good game plan of how they want to move forward with this young core, and I think that's positive for the organization.
Well, I like hearing that he's already having real conversations with these guys because you guys know the difference between the coach speak, we're all just feeling each other out and getting to know each other, and okay, we can all actually talk. We mentioned your comeback from 3-1 in the NBA Finals. One of the biggest stories kind of from that Game 7 was Ty Lue in the locker room at halftime calling LeBron James and saying, not calling, but calling out. I don't know. Should I say calling out? You were there. I don't know what the most appropriate way to say this. Challenging him to be better.
Yes.
And it reminds me of a Monty-ism because we're covering this series here, and Monty Williams has all these expressions. And he tells players, I'm not calling you out, I'm calling you up. And I think that is genius. It is how I would describe what Ty Lue did to LeBron in halftime of Game 7. It's how I would describe what I'm hearing in Boston right now. And that, to me, is by phrasing it that way and thinking of it that way, right? It's in a way to say, hey, I have confidence in you. I think you can be better, right? But there you go.
Jaylen Brown wasn't at the press conference. He was busy doing other things.
Yeah, well, with Barack
he's a
Obama
leader.
is not exactly a bad way to do it. So, yes, talking about leadership right there. I just think that the way a coach frames something, if it's with respect, and it's in all the examples we just talked about, it can be what Monty says. I'm not calling you out. I'm calling you up because I believe you can be better. I believe in you. And I think that approach will really work in Boston. It sounds like it's already starting. Let's talk more about that coaching carousel, though, because it's not done spinning yet. The Pelicans, the Magic, the Wizards, still without head coaches. Richard, let's focus on New Orleans today. What type of coach does that roster, led by Zion Williamson, Brandon Ingram, need in order to continue progress with their development?
Well, I actually like what Ime talked about. He wants to develop the young guys. And these are the type of, when you're talking about the Magic organization, that is one of those organizations that is a rebuild. It's a rebuild in a bit of a smaller market that hasn't had a ton of success, even when they had all-stars like
talking about the Pelicans, right?
Oh, I was talking about Orlando.
Oh, go ahead.
I was talking about... I was saying...
Go ahead, finish, go ahead.
Are you gonna let me finish?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, listen.
I just thought Rachel said the Pelicans.
No, she did. She's just throwing a lob, though. If you want to windmill it or if you want to lay it up like you would, that's fine.
That's cool.
So my point, I know you can't dunk. My point is this. When you look at a team that has talent and then when you look at a team that's a rebuild. The Pelicans have a ton of talent. They need to get an established coach in there. If you're not making the postseason next year, in my opinion, when you have an all-star in Brandon Ingram, you have an all-star in Zion Williamson, you have talent around them. I don't know what they're going to do with Lonzo, but ultimately you have talent. If you don't make it to the postseason, so I think you need somebody with coaching experience. I don't think that group is an individual that should have a coach without any head coaching experience, in my opinion.
Well, I think when you look at it, your core guys, your two main products is Zion Williamson and Brandon Ingram. Don't know what's going to happen with Lonzo Ball, right? So you need a coach in there that they can relate to, right? And me looking at what's happening right now in the Final Four, the last four teams that's standing, 3 of those guys are former players. So to me, right now what it goes to show me is that former players are getting the most out of their players, right? You look at Nate McMillan, he got the most out of the Hawks. You look at what Ty Lue is doing right now, getting the most out of the Clippers. You look at You look at in the what is this
Take your time.
going
Take your
to
time.
Monty Williams?
Yeah, take your
Monty
time.
Williams.
Take your
Monty
time.
Williams. I already said Talou. Monty
Who are
Williams.
you talking to?
Producer Steve is talking to
Oh,
you.
my bad.
Golly, man. Monty
talking
Williams.
to you. He doesn't
Monty
just
Williams,
talk to you. He
Monty
talks to
Williams
Perk,
is
too.
getting the most out of the Phoenix Suns. So I feel like, can a guy like Sam Cassell get a shot?
Oh,
please?
amen.
Well, y'all know I've been lobbying for Teresa Witherspoon. She's
Yeah.
already in that organization. I'm not just grabbing her name out of the air, right? She has a great connection with the players by all reports from New Orleans. She obviously has the credentials.
got
Talk
game.
about a former player.
Yeah.
And we have seen former players step in, even if they are first-time coaches in that respect at the NBA level. Steve Nash stepped in and did a pretty good job with Brooklyn. I will say, whether it is someone like her, who I think should get an opportunity somewhere, or whether it is someone else, a more experienced NBA coach who has an NBA coaching record, you say, oh, they should make the playoffs next year. They didn't even make the play-in tournament
I
this
know,
year.
and that's
they
why
didn't
the
even
coach-
get to
that's-
10th
that's
in the
why their
Western
coach is no
Conference.
longer there.
So there is no question that it's important, though, in two respects. First of all, yes,
No
that's
shot.
why they
That's
need
no
new
shots.
leadership.
That's not shots.
No, but that's
No.
why they need new leadership.
Yeah.
But it also means that that's where the bar is. So even if they just make the play-in bracket, it will be an improvement this year. We'll have to see if someone will get that job and do that. All right, coming up, we're going to talk more about
My brother, and I love Kevin Love, right, as a friend. But it was so many other guys deserving for that position that has been playing. He has not been playing, so I think it's unfair.
Now,
and I'm
also
leaving it
understand that certain players have backed out.
there.
So this is not.
But
This
it
is
was
not.
still other options. It was
Okay,
still
well,
other
don't just
options.
say other options without naming them.
I don't have to name them. I
Okay,
can
well,
say
then
what
you're
I
just
wanna
talking
say.
nothing then.
No, I'm talking something.
I mean, look, he played pretty well in the game the Cavs, I don't think, wanted him to win, and then
Yes.
he didn't play the next day.
They didn't play next day. They're like, we're done with you. No, look, he's dealt with injuries, and this is again one of those guys that played in 4 straight NBA Finals, and he, has been broken down. Their team hasn't been very good, so they've been very casual with the rebuild with him. So some of that is injury, some of that's not his fault.
All right, well, we will see what comes of that. I want to get to the game tonight in Atlanta. Giannis and Chris Middleton both had monster games in Game 3, 33 and 38 points versus the Hawks. So, Richard, how should the Hawks switch up schemes for Giannis and Middleton in Game 4 tonight?
Well, honestly, it was really the fourth quarter. I thought their game plan for most of the game was very, very good. And then Chris Middleton just had a special night. So, like, in those moments, you don't switch up too much. You might, if Chris Middleton starts to get going, maybe throw a double team at him where you're leaving Giannis, not necessarily out on the perimeter, but ultimately, I think you stick with your game plan. It's been working, but you got to have something in your bag if something gets going. You look at what T. Lue was double teaming Devin Booker in certain moments, or double teaming Luka Doncic in certain moments that were unexpected. That might be something you would see them throw at Middleton if he gets going late.
Well, it hasn't been working. He just was missing shots. He had wide open looks. So I don't know what game you was watching, but at the end of the day, it's really nothing that the Hawks could switch up, Rachel, because they don't have the personnel to guard. DeAndre Hunter is out, who was their primary defender at the wing position, and with Giannis attacking downhill, opening the lane, especially when he moves to the 5 position, it's hard to guard the Milwaukee Bucks and Chris Middleton because they have so much spacing.
He says I don't know what games, but missing shots is missing shots. At the end of the day, I believe that the game plan was leave a person in a position to either fail or succeed. They kept doing it, and there was moments where he did not succeed, and in game 3, he succeeded in a very, very high level way. So I wouldn't switch too much, but again, all of this is really hinged on Trae Young's ankle.
And look, Trae Young may try and shoot around this morning, decide he can't go. Trae Young might try in pregame warmups and decide he can't go. He might go out there, but like he was in the fourth quarter of the last game, he might be not quite himself. He said he was missing his explosiveness. You can't get in early. You can't get those bigger windows as a smaller player. All of a sudden, you got a defender's face in your hand in your face. If he is not himself or just not on the court, the Hawks' best chance is?
No chance.
I'd never agree with him, but yes, he's correct in there. But it's not that hard to be agreeing on that one. Zero chance.
We'll find out. I mean, look, stranger things have happened.
Not like that.
We wish Trae Young good health.
Yes, we do.
Should be a good game tonight. I'm interested to see what
Take
the
care of
Bucks
yourself,
do and
Trae.
whether this group and Giannis finally gets to the NBA Finals over the next few days. We will be back.